On this episode of China Unscripted, China is still fighting Genghis Khan as Mongolians staged the largest protest in China since the 1989 Tiananmen Square Massacre. Has China been part of Mongolian territory since ancient times? Welcome to China Unscripted. I'm Chris Chappell.
I'm Shirley Zhang.
And I'm Matt Gnesta.
Joining us today is Enghebatu Togochog of the Southern Mongolia Human Rights Information Center. Thanks for joining us today, Enghebatu.
Thank you for having me.
So first off, I think most people have heard of Mongolia, the country between China and Russia. But where is Southern Mongolia?
Well, Southern Mongolia was an integral part of the greater Mongolian nation. Modern-day independent country of Mongolia is traditionally called by Mongolian as Northern Mongolia. So Southern Mongolia is southern part of the greater Mongolian nation. So it is south to the independent country of Mongolia, and now it is under the Chinese, inside the People's Republic of China as an so-called the ethnic minority autonomous region. Usually it's known as Inner Mongolia, which is a direct translation of a Chinese word called name Mongol, which is it's a very Sino-centric, highly propagandistic terminology that conveying the message that this part of Mongolia is inside of China, inner. In our own language, we never call ourselves inner or outer. It's just, we call ourselves over Mongol, which means just Southern Mongolia. It's a pure geographical terminology. And the independent country of Mongolia is traditionally called as Northern Mongolia, Outer Mongols. So these are all geographical terminology, but after Mongolia is divided, and especially after the People's Republic of China annexed Southern Mongolia into its own territory, they use a name which is Inner Mongolia. While Western languages, especially in English, it was directly translated from the Chinese word Inner Mongolia. So we prefer Southern Mongolia, which is a correct translation of our name over the Mongol.
So how did China end up annexing what you call Southern Mongolia?
Well, Southern Mongolia was an independent, the part of the greater Mongolia up until 1949, but starting as early as 1930s and 1940s, the Chinese Communist Party was very active in Southern Mongolia. And with the help of the Chinese Communist Party, some Mongolian communists set up the Inner Southern Mongolian Autonomous Government in 1947, so 2 years before the People's Republic of China was established. That means even though there was a strong influence from the Chinese Communist Party, but that government, Southern Mongolian government, was an independent government. So after People's Republic of China was established in 1949, Chinese government officially annexed Southern Mongolia as the first the so-called ethnic, at that time it's called nationality minority autonomous region. This nationality minority autonomous region was later depoliticized to turn to ethnic minority autonomous region. So then this model, the so-called autonomous region, was first formulated in Southern Mongolia, and then later on they used the same model in Tibet and East Turkestan, or known as Xinjiang. There were also two other autonomous regions. So the Southern Mongolia was officially became one of the five so-called ethnic minority autonomous region in China.
Yeah, I noticed that it seems all of the autonomous regions in China are really not that autonomous. I know recently, a couple months ago, there was a big sort of protest movement in Southern Mongolia, Inner Mongolia, about over Mongolian language being taught in schools. What was happening with that?
Well, after Southern Mongolia was annexed to China officially in 1949, at the beginning, of course, Chinese government and the CCP promised that Mongolians will enjoy autonomy, nationality autonomy.
Yeah, I know what a promise from the CCP is worth.
Yeah, but all those promises turned out to be broken ones, and then Mongolians soon after the People's Republic of China take over the region, they started implementing a series of policies, to heavy-handed policies to wipe out Mongolian culture and the tradition, and even there were some large-scale genocide, physical genocide, targeting the entire Mongolian population. For example, in 1960s, late 1960s and 1970s, there was one campaign called purging the members of a national separatist organization called Southern Mongolia and People's Revolutionary Party. And then under this name, they just killed 100,000 Mongolians and persecuted 500,000. At that time, Mongolian population was only 1.5 million, so 1/3 of the population is in battle.
So this sounds a lot like what's happening in Xinjiang today.
Exactly. So, a lot of news media and human rights organizations asked me that, okay, so what's happening in Southern Mongolia looks like it's very similar to, or it will, the Southern Mongolia will turn into the region like Xinjiang. I told them, no, actually, Southern Mongolia was already been there, and that Southern Mongolia was the first nation occupied by China, and then all those genocide, ethnic cleansing, political repression, and cultural eradication. All these policies, these movements already took place in Southern Mongolia.
It's like China's forgotten genocide almost.
Exactly. It is a forgotten genocide. So that was the first physical genocide that took place in Southern Mongolia. And then another genocide that you have mentioned earlier, the cultural genocide that against which Southern Mongolian population stood up to protest, and that happened 4 months ago. The central government of China started implementing a new policy called the second generation bilingual education. And the goal of this policy is very clear, is to wipe out the Mongolian language, culture, and identity entirely from Southern Mongolia, to turn the Southern Mongolia into a Chinese society, homogeneous Chinese society. So that's their goal. So what happened is Mongolians realized that this is another way of genocide, cultural genocide. So entire Southern Mongolian population, which is about 6 million, stood up against this new round of atrocity, and students took to the streets, and at least 300,000 students launched a region-wide school strike. And the parents also took to the street, and including ordinary herders and farmers, and they all joined together to say no to the Chinese government's new round of cultural genocide. So Mongolians consider this a genocide because the Mongolian they already lost their political independence, their traditional way of life was already destroyed, and environment, Mongolian grassland is seriously destroyed by the Chinese settlers. So Mongolians thought the language, their mother tongue, is the last defense of their national identity. So if Mongolians lose their language, mother tongue, then they will cease to exist as a distinct people. So that is the reason why the entire population stood up. It's enough is enough. Now we cannot take it any longer. So, of course, the Chinese authorities started cracking down on them, and at least 8 to 10,000 people were arrested, detained, and put under house arrest, and 11 people lost their lives in protest of this new policy. And thousands of Mongolian teachers, parents, and even some Mongolian government officials and Mongolian party members joined this protest. So this is as a region-wide civil disobedience resistance movement.
So you said 11 people lost their lives. How did that happen? Were they killed?
Okay, so most of them are teachers and parents. They were under tremendous pressure from the authorities. For example, two of them, Mrs. Sorna, who's actually it's a pretty high-ranking CCP official. Actually, she committed suicide. She was under pressure, and then she's before she jumped from her apartment building, she told her husband and mother that I'm dying for my right to my mother tongue, and then she jumped from her apartment. And the another cases, for example, Mrs. Ulan, she's a principal of a Mongolian elementary school in northern and southern Mongolia. She was also, she committed suicide in the same manner. So this is because Mongolians, at some point, they realized it's not worth living, because if you lose your language, you lose your dignity. So most of them committed suicide.
So this was sort of the driving force behind why you started the Southern Mongolia Human Rights Information Center?
Yes, my organization was established in 2001, 20 years ago. Yes, our organization is the first organization established in the United States to work specifically on the human rights issues of the Mongolian people in China. So yes, there have been number of cases like political prisoners issues, and like Chinese authorities arbitrary arrest, extrajudicial detention, and of course Chinese authorities policy toward destroying Mongolian tradition, language, and culture, as well as destroying the environment. So all these are the issues that our organization have been working on for 20 years. Yes, it's reporting on the human rights violation cases and raising awareness of the Southern Mongolian issues to the international community. That's what our organization has been doing.
When you were talking about the the protests in the schools, like 300,000 kids on like a school strike. That is really significant protest for something that happens inside China. Do you think the authorities were surprised by how many people were protesting?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, many observers say that this protest is the largest protest in mainland China after the 1989 students' movement. So yes, the scale is unprecedented. Even in Southern Mongolia, well, 9 years ago there was another major protest in Southern Mongolia, but it was not as large as this. At that time, it was reason of the protest was a Mongolian herder who tried to defend his grazing land was brutally killed by a Chinese truck driver,
Oh, I remember that
truck
story.
driver,
Yeah.
and that sparked a large-scale protest 9 years ago. But that was mostly protests joined by students and herders. But this time, it's almost entire population, Southern Mongolian population, stood up, say, to this new policy. Yes, and Chinese government did not expect this. Apparently, like they thought Southern Mongolia is the easiest place to handle among all the three nations, occupied nations like Tibet, Eastern, and Southern Mongolia. The Chinese government always used Southern Mongolia as model autonomy. They just advertise in the international communities that Southern Mongolia is a model autonomy. People are happy there. There's no ethnic problems and so on. But it turned out to be the most difficult place to handle. So if you look at the order that the same policy was implemented in the three regions, actually it was first implemented in 2017 in Eastern Xinjiang. And obviously, they thought this area is the most problematic area. So this need to be implemented in Xinjiang first. And then in 2018, the same policy was implemented in Tibet. And interestingly, there was not much protest reported on in these two regions. We learned some protests took place in Tibetan areas, I think 1 or 2 counties, but it was not as large as that in Southern Mongolia. So then they started implementing this policy in Southern Mongolia because they thought in Southern Mongolia it must be very easy, and then there should not be any resistance. That's their thought. That's what they thought. But again, right? It was exactly opposite. So Southern Mongolia. Well, to be honest, Southern Mongolia is outside Southern Mongolia, also didn't expect this would happen because it was very difficult for any people to carry out this kind of large-scale protest. But since the protest is a very, typical civil disobedience mass movement, there's no leaders. So they just coordinate themselves through WeChat, which is the only available Chinese social media. And so the actual discussion started as early as June, right after one Chinese high-ranking official visited from central government, visited the eastern part of Southern Mongolia's Tonglia municipality. The interesting part of this policy is that even though this policy is directly implemented from the central government, Chinese central government. There has been no single official document issued from the central government. So everything is verbally, told to the local authorities. And then that particular, high-ranking official, his name is Ge Weiwei, he did not bring any document, official document or anything. He just had some meeting with the local educational bureau officials, and then he just told them that, okay, the new policy will be implemented in starting September 1st. So soon after that, Mongolian parents, started the discussion of protest. Well, this discussion took place, was like at least, the preparation took at least 2 months. And then starting the late August and early September, the actual protest took place.
Is the central government still going to implement the policy to not let Mongolian be taught in schools?
Yeah, I think one of the reasons why they did not officially let people know is because they probably realized there would be some form of opposition or resistance. So on the other hand, their goal is very clear. This time they really wanted to completely change everything. That's why many Mongolians consider this is the final stroke or finishing touch of the cultural genocide that China has been implementing for 7 decades in the Southern Mongolia. So this is the last campaign that they really carefully planned. So that's why they probably, they wanted this to be carried out in a very secret manner. And then so they didn't want to have, to draw any attention from the international community as well. So these are some of the reasons why they carried this out in this manner, any very surreptitious and secret manner.
So are they still going to carry out the policy? Like after the protest, is it still happening?
Yes, they already started implementing it, and students refused to go back to school, but they pressured their parents to bring them back to the school. And even the Chinese Public Security Bureau and security personnel were sent directly to the families of rural Mongolian herders and bring their children back to school by force. So the students already returned to school by force, but the students were still, even after they were brought back to the school, they were protesting within the school, inside the school camps. Now, so we received some information showing that during the celebration of the national holiday, which is October 1st, right? There were many events, and then even during those events, Mongolian students protested. So this means the protest is still continuing, but of course the crackdown is everywhere and very widespread, and police already stationed in many schools, Mongolian schools, to make sure that there will not be any large-scale protests. So they are carrying out cultural revolution type of propaganda campaign and brainwash campaign in these schools, and even some elementary school were, actually not some, most of the elementary schools are forced to have some military training. The military trainings was only for those college students, but now in Southern Mongolia, even elementary school students are forced to receive military training.
So you mentioned the Cultural Revolution, and one of the things that they did during the Cultural Revolution of the 60s and 70s is rewrite history. I noticed you have in the background a picture of Genghis Khan, and Genghis Khan, of course, the Mongolian chief or warlord, depending on how you describe him, who ruled all of China, probably the biggest territory of any leader in history. And what has the Chinese Communist Party been doing lately in terms of the history of Genghis Khan?
Well, Genghis Khan is
But hold on, it's pronounced Genghis. I've been saying this wrong for 30 years.
In the Mongolian, it's a Genghis Khan, actually, Genghis Khan. So yes, Genghis Khan is a Mongolian hero, national hero, not only in Southern Mongolia, but also among the Mongols around the world, including independent country of Mongolia, the Buryat and the Kalmyk and even Tova and even Hazara, which is part of Pakistan and Afghanistan. So all these Mongolian descendants consider Genghis Khan as their the leader, and they're even like equivalent to their god. So almost every Mongolian family has Genghis Khan's portrait, or yes, but as you mentioned, the Genghis Khan created Genghis Khan and his sons and grandsons created the largest contiguous land empire in human history, as China was only one province of Mongolian empire at that time. But this is the history. China used this history and then rewrote this history, and then China now is claiming that Genghis Khan is actually Chinese hero. So when I was in Southern Mongolia, and history books always claim that, clearly saying that Genghis Khan is one of the Chinese heroes. And when Mongolians actually now started, all in Southern Mongolia, everybody is like all families worship Genghis Khan as almost God. And then the Chinese government realized that, especially after this protest, this is something that they cannot tolerate, because Mongolians are uniting together under the Genghis Khan. So they started now implementing some sort of carrying out a campaign to just eradicate any memory of Genghis Khan. For example, in schools, some statues or some portraits that the previously set up or now taken down. And so in the same time, they're still using history of Mongolia to justify its territorial claim. For example, Chinese government says that Tibet is part of China because it was part of Mongolian Empire. So Mongolian Empire is, according to Chinese, the official version of history, Mongolian Empire is part of Chinese history. So these kind of like very distorted logic serves as China used this kind of logic to justify its territorial occupation, including East Turkestan and Xinjiang and all this. So they now, on one hand, they suppress all forms of like belief or worship of Genghis Khan. On the other hand, they use the Genghis Khan Mongolian history as their tool to justify their territorial claim over once independent nations like Tibet and Uzbekistan.
It's history with Chinese characteristics.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. So look, some allusion. Who is the very famous Chinese writer? He even said that if a nation use their occupiers' history to claim other country as part of them, then probably Russia even has better credentials to claim that, because Russia was also part of Mongolian Empire. So Russia can claim that maybe China is part of Russia, because Russia was also part of Mongolian Empire.
Or China can claim Russia is part of China.
Oh, no.
Yes, absolutely. Now, actually, Chinese government is, especially using the road and Belt and Road Initiative. It's for example, Tajikistan recently. It's in Tajikistan, China is claiming that part of their territory is Chinese territory. The Belt and Road Initiative it's debt trap diplomacy, that, right? So now China is claiming, I think, almost half of the Tajikistan territory as part of claiming that this is part of Chinese territory. So they're including independent country of Mongolia. There have been a number of books published by Chinese official scholars claiming that independent country of Mongolia should be part of China. And then, so they even claim that after uniting with the, bringing back Taiwan, and next is Mongolia, independent country of Mongolia, that they are claiming. And so this is backed by the Chinese government. So these are all Chinese official scholars are claiming these kind of using this kind of very distorted history to claim the independent country as part of their territory.
I was going to ask, how does the country of Mongolia feel about China basically claiming, or the Chinese Communist Party trying to claim that Genghis Khan is Chinese?
Well, Mongolia, independent country of Mongolia, is sandwiched between two powers, like superpower, or I would say like two authoritarian powers, China and Russia. So it's a very difficult for government of Mongolia to directly confront China. China has a lot of influence in Mongolia, not only culturally, economically, but also politically. So Mongolia is, of course, all Mongolian citizens do not like this claim, but government of Mongolia cannot do much about this. But they are doing their own, they have their own history. So the way of claiming Genghis Khan as their ancestor. Of course, this is so in independent country of Mongolia is Genghis Khan is, of course, it's no question, it's national hero. Genghis Khan is the great leader of Mongolian nation in independent country of Mongolia. But again, it has been very difficult for the independent country of Mongolia to pressure China to withdraw their claim over Genghis Khan. because China again uses Southern Mongolia, which is part of China, as an excuse that Genghis Khan is still a hero of Zhonghua nationality because Southern Mongolia is part of China, or Mongolia, the so-called the Mongols, or Mongolian nationality, ethnic Mongolians, is a member of the 55 so-called ethnic minorities. So this is the logic that the Chinese government use to this kind of a claim over Mongolian history, Genghis Khan.
I hear Abraham Lincoln was a great Chinese hero as well.
Do I want to ask how you came to that conclusion?
In the same way that the Chinese Communist Party comes to any of its conclusions, it just makes it up.
Well, I was just thinking about, if what you said about Mongolia being next after Taiwan. It's like right now it's the South China Sea, then it's Taiwan, then it's Mongolia. It's going to take over all of Asia.
Yeah, pretty much.
I mean, it's also India, right? I mean, they're taking over parts of India piece by piece.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah.
Bhutan.
But they claim almost like, wherever Chinese maybe merchant or, whichever country that China had some relationship in the past is, subjected to be claimed as part of Chinese territory. I mean, it's, but if you look at the real history, it's, actually Mongolia and China, these two nations have a very clear boundary between them. The Great Wall, that's actually the proof that Chinese considered Mongolians as a different people and different nation for 2,000 years. But now all of a sudden they just forgot all this, and then they just cross the Great Wall, and then claiming that Mongolia, which is in throughout the Chinese history, Mongolians were considered as barbarians, and so now they all of a sudden they just claiming that no, they are not barbarian, they are a part of us.
Yeah, when I was in China, I remember visiting the Great Wall, and I was really surprised that it was only a couple hours from Beijing, and I'm like, well, it's the Great Wall, but it's dividing, because I didn't know really about the history of Inner Mongolia, Southern Mongolia at the time, and I'm like, why is the wall separating China inside China? Like, it's not on the border. It's like it's only like a few miles from Beijing, essentially.
Yes.
So everything north of that is still China. So it kind of makes sense now that actually historically China did consider that to be the border.
Well, in fact, Mongolia had better credential to claim China as part of Mongolia, because
that's dangerous, Beijing, but yes.
Beijing is actually built by Kublai Khan. It's at that time it's called Khanbalik, or in Chinese called Daidu, and modern day Beijing was actually built by, and then designer of this city is actually a Uyghur person, Uyghur man. So, well, of course, the China was at that time is just one province of Mongolian Empire, and so Great Wall was just it didn't actually, it felt to block Mongolians coming to China at the time. But in every dynasty of China, the Chinese rebuilt the Great Wall to make sure that they have clear boundary between the barbarians, which are Mongolians. So, but now it's the things totally change, and then they are saying the Mongolia is a member of Zhonghua nationality. So the very theory behind the recent new policies, second generation bilingual education, is a new ethnic policy called second generation ethnic policy, which is proposed by three official scholars in China a few years back. And then very idea of this policy is that all 55 ethnic minorities should not assert their separate national identity. They should be, they are member of the greater Zhonghua nationality. That's why they are Chinese. So this is, they 5-6 years ago, they tried to implement this and then to try to test it in Southern Mongolia. And one of the three officials, Marong, visited Southern Mongolia, and then he had some discussion with Mongolian scholars, and then he met with a strong opposition from the Mongolians, and then they kind of like did not, the idea was aborted somehow at that time. And then later on, now Xi Jinping picked this up, and then he realized this is a good idea. This is the good idea to assimilate all these or wipe out all these ethnic minorities, separate identity. And so this is the second generation bilingual education is a part of the greater campaign of second generation ethnic policy.
That's a very interesting thing, because that is definitely a change from how the Chinese Communist Party before had, tried to trot out the, 56 happy ethnic minorities, as proof that their rule over China was accepted by all these different people. And look at how much diversity we have inside China. So, this thing about assimilation is a pretty different.
In China, yes, the so-called 55 ethnic minority. This is a new creation. Actually, there were not that many ethnic or nationalities. For example, among those 55 ethnic minorities, at least 4 or 5 are Mongolians. Actually, they're just Mongolian tribes. So this is part of their divide and conquer, right? They set up actually, separate ethnic identity for those people. For example, Dagor, which is in northeastern Southern Mongolia, they are just one Mongolian tribe. And so they set up a separate ethnic identity for them. And then even in Gansu and then these areas, there are Dongxiang and Baoan, and then those are all Mongolian. Even their languages almost like 90%, 95% same with our language. So they just set up this kind of artificial ethnic identity for them. So now they realized these are just, especially for Mongolians and Tibetans, separate national identity is something that is actually becoming the base of their separatist activities. So they think this need to be, Chinese authorities think these identity need to be completely erased. So I am pretty sure China will continue to say, hey, we are still multinational, multi-ethnic culture, state, but these people will not be allowed to continue to practice their tradition and then assert their distinct identities.
So they've moved from cultural appropriation to cultural genocide.
Well, I mean,
they were doing the genocide.
They're still gonna, have people doing, Mongolian dances or something during the
the National People's Congress, and they get everyone to dress up, and they look so happy.
Yeah, or
Yeah.
the this spring festival, the Chinese New Year gala thing. They're gonna, yeah.
uh, a Mongolian scholar said that we can divide we can put the 55 ethnic minorities in two big categories. One is dangerous, one is colorful. And then dangers are Tibetans, Mongolians, Uyghurs, because they were occupied nation. They had their own separate nation. They still have very fresh memory of their nationhood. So they are dangerous. And then colorful is like southern, ethnic groups who can no longer, the demanding the the independence or separate nationhood. So they are just for showcasing. Yeah, they're needed. So that's why they have a beautiful, colorful dress, and yeah, when there's like a meeting or the so-called during the two meetings, it's good to have them there. But again, the Mongolians and the Tibetans and Uyghurs are different because they are still asking for real national freedom.
Yeah, it actually really reminds me also of the way that the Chinese Communist Party treats religion as well. It's not just because the people who have a religious identity are similar to people who have a national identity in the way that Mongolians or Uyghurs do, because you have something else that you believe in that
Right.
brings you together that is not the Chinese Communist Party.
Exactly. So Chinese Communist Party is extremely insecure. They think anything other than the communist belief is considered as a threat to their regime. So including religion, like Falun Gong, and then all these are considered as a threat. So of course, the assertion of separate ethnic identity or national identity, so of course, it's a threat to their regime. So yes, it's a Chinese. The regime looks very formidable, but inside, they are really, they don't have any inner strength. They are very weak inside, and then they are very insecure.
Well, they have no history. They have no identity outside of this, short period, this short history of communism.
Exactly. There's no, they don't have, they really cannot represent actually the Chinese culture either. They are just, it's kind of, very authoritarian, the ideology they embrace. So yes, I totally agree with you. They don't have their own belief. They don't have their own identity. It's just they see everything as different from them. Is considered as a threat to them.
I almost feel bad for them.
Almost.
Almost.
What do you see happening next in Southern Mongolia? Is the resistance to the policy or to this assimilation going to continue?
Yes, it's not it's not possible for them to carry out the protests in the same manner now because it's Southern Mongolia pretty much virtually turned out to a police state right now, so it's not easy for them to have a public protest or anything. But again, Mongolians will continue their protest resistance movement in a different form, and Chinese policy for ethnic policy or in Southern Mongolia, it's really kind of a failure because they failed to win the heart and mind of the Mongolian people, and they thought they already were successful in doing this. But if you look at this protest, the entire population is saying no to the Chinese authorities. So to China, it's a big loss of face. Actually, they considered this region would be the easiest and the people in Southern Mongolia the happiest, but it turned out not to be the case.
Well, hopefully someday they'll find out that they have less control over the Chinese people themselves.
Absolutely, yes, absolutely. Chinese people themselves will rise up, and absolutely, there's no permanent, authoritarian regime that lasts forever. So one day people will rise up and say no to this authoritarian regime. So yes, China will one day will become a democratic country and free from any tyranny. But again, in terms of how long it takes, we don't know. But it will definitely in the future, China will become a democratic country.
Well, I think that's definitely a nice optimistic note to end on. Really, thanks a lot for joining us today. I think, a lot of people don't know about what's happening in Mongolia, Southern Mongolia. It really is the sort of forgotten genocide. Like, people know about Tibet, they know about Xinjiang.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Well, thank you for having me.
And if somebody watching wanted to know more about the movement, where can they go?
They can visit our website, Southern Mongolian Human Rights Information Center.
Great. Well, I'll put a link to that below. Thanks again for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
It was very interesting what he was saying about how China is using the history of Genghis Khan to sort of make territorial claims. I was mentioning how Abraham Lincoln was a Chinese hero, but no, I think this is how China claims not just the United States, but also most of the Western world.
Through Genghis Khan?
Yes, because Genghis Khan's grandson, Kublai Khan, had his pleasure palace, Xanadu.
Okay.
Xanadu is the name of the 1980s roller skate rock opera Xanadu, which features a pantheon of Greek gods. Therefore, the Greek pantheon belongs to China via Kublai Khan. Therefore, China lays claim not just to the Electric Lights Orchestra, which did the music for Xanadu, but also the entire Western history, the Greek Empire.
I like how you're using Kublai Khan to to go forward and backward in time.
Well, I mean, why does time's arrow point forward? Physicists have no answer. Therefore, we've been a part of Chinese territory since ancient times.
I feel like your theory maybe needs a little work.
No, it doesn't.
Oh, okay, it's perfect.
It's perfect. By the way, watch Xanadu. It's lots of fun. Great music.
Actually,
Olivia Newton-John.
Oh my gosh. I've never watched it, but I feel like probably... Do we need to have a China Uncensored movie night?
Oh, maybe. It's a fun one.
Oh, God. Okay. That's not where I was expecting this to go, by the way.
No?
I mean,
no.
we did watch The Room together, and that was loads of fun.
Also, what else? They Live?
Oh, They Live. One
They
of the
Live was
best
actually,
movies ever made.
It's a solid movie.
I'm not so... I don't know about Xanadu. This sounds a little... Yeah. Or we could just watch that Russian music video to that Genghis Khan song.
Oh, yeah. What was that?
I think we used it on some episode because I just happened to find it on YouTube. But they pronounced Genghis Khan correctly.
Yeah.
I've been saying it wrong all of my life.
But if you said Genghis Khan, nobody would know who you were talking
Genghis Khan.
about. Yeah. I mean, when he was talking about... we were talking about like the Mongolian like culture and like the whole colorful ethnic minorities. Colorful was just dangerous. I had this flashback to as a kid watching the Spring Festival Gala, the CCTV propaganda one. And there was one where like there's two people and they're singing this like beautiful song about the mid-autumn moon. And I remembered it because it was like such a haunting melody from my childhood. And I tried to find it a couple months ago, and then I realized it's actually a Mongolian song
Oh, interesting.
that they translated into Mandarin. And these two people were singing it dressed in ethnic Mongolian costumes. But of course, as a child, I did not know that they were Mongolian costumes. I'm sure like older people would have. But it's like an example of, you know, the happy ethnic minority thing. But also like they translated the song into Mandarin, and I grew up thinking that this was a Chinese song, you know.
Oh, wow.
Like it just
Yeah, the second generation will basically lose everything. And you know what's interesting is in the Inner Mongolia autonomous region of China, there's actually Enghebatu said there were 6 million ethnic Mongolians, but there's also, in addition to that, about 20 million Han Chinese people. And so it's essentially, and that's happened not entirely, but largely since the takeover by the CCP. So it's kind of like what they've done later, what they did to Tibet. And what they're now doing in Xinjiang is moving Han Chinese in to kind of occupy it. And, you know, actually the country of Mongolia only has about, I think, just over 3 million people.
wow.
And so most Mongolians live in China.
Oh.
But that also means that most Mongolians, 2/3 of Mongolians are living in a place where their culture is being wiped out.
And he mentioned briefly the whole thing about Mongolian herders. And like this is part of China's whole, it's under the banner of their poverty alleviation thing. Like whenever they boast about how many people they lift out of poverty, the way they're doing it in areas like Tibet, Mongolia, Xinjiang, where like traditionally there have been people in like very poor small villages or living a nomadic lifestyle, like Tibetan herders or Mongolian herders, they take them and kind of like forcibly assimilate them into like, you know, you cannot live this nomadic lifestyle on this land. We're going to take you, because also we need to take the land, and then we're going to take you and put you in like an apartment building or something, and we're going to give you a factory job and like these things that will like raise their income level, so you are alleviating poverty.
Right. I mean, I think like on one hand, what it does is it contributes to China's GDP, but there's another, I think, much deeper reason to do it, which is control. Because once you take people out of the nomadic lifestyle, you control them because you've got a fixed address, so you know where they are. And then they're living off of an income rather than living off of the land. And so with an income, you can control their money. And especially as China moves to digital currency, that's a way of them implementing control over all Chinese people. And so if, you know, as the Communist Party increasingly controls people's money and where they live, they have almost total control over their entire livelihoods. Whereas if someone's a herder and they're moving from place to place seasonally, like the CCP just barely has any control over them. And that makes them very uncomfortable.
I think they still have a good deal of control. Enghebatu talked about the police going to these herders' families and forcing the kids to go back to school.
Right, and they're doing that because they fear not having enough control. So, I mean, anyway, like I think it's just a destruction of a lifestyle and a destruction of that history. And so, yeah, I mean, I think it's what's so tragic about it is like the longer the CCP remains in power, the further and further away people will get from that culture. So like it's be very hard to go back to that.
The Chinese Communist Party has been essentially the Dark Ages for China in terms of the amount of cultural and historical destruction that has happened with Chinese culture, as well as you say, the ethnic culture of like the Mongolians, the Uyghurs, the Tibetans. It's the Dark Ages, basically.
That's actually a really interesting way of framing it.
Which is why I say coming up next is the Chinese Renaissance.
Oh, I was going to say the Dark Ages might be not like a correct historical paradigm, but
I beg your pardon.
The
Dark Ages has been part of Chinese territory since ancient times.
Okay.
Because it happened after the fall of the Roman Empire, which is an extension of the Greek Empire, which was an extension of the gods in Xanadu in the movie in the 80s roller skate rock opera. What was your point?
I honestly don't remember anymore.
I was talking about the Dark Ages. China's in its Dark Ages
just
now.
that historians think that maybe the Dark Ages were not so dark. Like,
Yeah, no, that totally wrecks Chris's point. So
yeah, okay.
I think we'll just scrub that from our memories.
All right. I mean, I don't know if we want to go back to something serious, but it is this kind of assimilation cycle that moves between these different ethnic minorities, and like they use what they learn from one to like, subjugate the next, and then kind of like,
You see the cycle.
yeah, and then like it kind of like what works in one area they'll implement in another area. So like, Tibet affects Xinjiang, but Xinjiang is also affecting Mongolia, Southern Mongolia, or, which affected Tibet. So it's like it's like,
Yeah,
it goes
it's what
in
you
both.
call a pilot program, but for genocide.
But they're now reverse engineering stuff, like,
Modern problems require technocratic solutions.
if we don't, I mean, I think if if the CCP gets away with what it's doing in Xinjiang, which despite the fact that, there's definitely more publicity and like more awareness, and, countries like the US is starting to sanction China for some of these things, like if they essentially get away with it, then they're going to like, up next is camps for Tibetans and Mongolians, right?
And not summer camps.
No.
Well, anyway, you definitely brought that to a much darker place. So thank you, Shelley.
You're welcome.
The Dark Ages. Thanks for watching China Unscripted. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell,
I'm Shelley Zhang.
And I'm Matt Gnezda.
and we'll see you in Xanadu.